Every homestead channel on this platform will tell you to put your spring eggs down in lime water. 24 at a time, in a crock, in the dark. And they'll keep a year without a refrigerator. I told you the same thing last week on this channel. I said I'd show you how. I spent this week in the research instead of the kitchen, and I'm not going to show you. I was wrong, and the reason I was wrong has been settled in the literature since before I was born. My name is Hollis Ward. I'm 63. I was raised 11 miles off the Current River in Carter County, Missouri, and my grandmother Verna kept a laying flock for 50 years and put up eggs every spring in a 5-gallon crock of lime water in the ground. She did it. I watched her do it. And I'm still telling you not to. Those two things sit together fine, and by the end of this you'll understand exactly why. Because the thing that changed isn't the method. It's what we learned about where the bacteria comes from. Stay with me. You're going to get the one fact that breaks it, why the old-timers weren't fools, what to do if you've already got a bucket going in the basement right now, and the two methods that actually solve the same problem, one of which costs you nothing, and one of which costs about $7. Here's the problem, and it's real, and it hasn't changed since Verna's time. If you keep chickens, you know the shape of the year. April, May, June, the birds are laying like they're being paid by the piece. 18 hours of daylight and every nest box full. You're giving eggs to neighbors. You're eating eggs 3 ways a day. There are cartons stacked in the refrigerator door and cartons on the counter, and you're still gathering. Then October comes. Daylight drops, the birds go into molt, and production falls off a cliff. By January, you've got 14 hens, and you're standing in a grocery store buying eggs, which is about the most ridiculous feeling there is. That gap is the whole problem. 6 months of too many, 6 months of not enough. Verna solved it with a crock. And what I have to tell you is that her solution was reasonable in 1938 and is not reasonable in 2026. And the difference is not squeamishness. It's one specific piece of research. Let me tell you what water glassing is so you know exactly what we're discussing. You take a food-safe bucket. You mix an alkaline solution, historically sodium silicate, which is where the name comes from, a syrupy mineral compound that people literally called water glass. More recently, and more commonly now, calcium hydroxide, which you buy in the canning aisle as pickling lime. 1 ounce of lime to 1 quart of water. You put fresh, unwashed eggs down in that solution, pointed end down, fully submerged. You put a lid on it. You set it somewhere cool and dark, and you leave it 8 months, 12 months, some people say 2 years. It seals the shell. That much is true, and it's chemistry you can watch. A hen's egg has somewhere between 7 and 17,000 microscopic pores in the shell, and the alkaline solution reacts and plugs them. Moisture stops leaving. Carbon dioxide stops leaving. Air stops going in. And here's the part that makes it so convincing. It works. Visually it works. You pull an egg out at month 10 and it looks like an egg. Crack it and the yolk stands up. It cooks. It tastes like an egg. That's why this method has survived 130 years of being passed hand to hand. Fanny Farmer put instructions in the Boston Cooking School cookbook in 1896. It was studied seriously. There are papers in Poultry Science on it, one by G.O. Hall in 1945, another by A.L. Romanoff in 1948. These were not cranks. This was mainstream agricultural science of its day. The problem was never whether the egg would look right in month 10. Here's the fact. It's one sentence, and it takes the whole thing down. Salmonella enteritidis can get into the egg inside the hen before the shell is ever formed. Read that again. For the entire era when water glassing was standard practice, the working assumption in agriculture was that the inside of an egg was sterile. The hen builds it, it's sealed, it's clean. Any contamination had to come from the outside, off the shell, through the pores, after the egg was laid. If that were true, water glassing would be an excellent method, brilliant even. Plug the pores, nothing gets in, done. It isn't true. Research established that this particular organism can colonize a hen's reproductive tract and be deposited in the egg while the egg is being assembled, in the white, sometimes in the yolk membrane. Scientists call that vertical transmission, meaning the bacteria passes from the mother into the offspring rather than being picked up from the environment. And there is no way to look at an egg and know. Not by candling it. That's holding an egg up to a bright light to see the air cell in the yolk. And it's the right tool for checking freshness and cracks. And it is completely useless here. Not by smell. Not by float test. The egg looks perfect. So now run the water glassing method with that fact in hand. You take an egg that may already have salmonella inside it. You seal the shell so nothing can get out. You put it in a container at cool room temperature, not 37 degrees, room temperature. And you leave it there for 10 months. You didn't preserve the egg. You built it a room. That's the thing I couldn't get around. And I tried. I read for 3 days looking for the study that says the alkaline solution penetrates and kills what's inside. And it doesn't exist. And Colorado State's Extension Service raises the opposite concern, that lime water can work its way in through a porous shell rather than the contents being protected from it. The bloom, that's the natural coating a hen puts on an egg as she lays it, also called the cuticle, and it's a real and effective barrier. The bloom is a door. It's a good door. It does not help you when the thing you're worried about is already in the house, which is exactly the same trap as the butter crock I showed you in the first video. That water seal on a butter keeper stops oxygen from getting to the butter. It does not do one thing about what was in the cream when you churned it. Every seal in the world only answers the question of what's coming from outside. Now, before anybody thinks I'm calling my grandmother careless, I'm not, and neither should you. Verna was doing exactly what the best available agricultural science of her lifetime recommended. She had no refrigeration until 1951, and not much after that. She had a flock of maybe 20 birds on a hillside, a family to feed, and a winter coming. The alternative to lime water wasn't safety. The alternative was no eggs from November to March. She also had a different flock than you do. Her birds ranged on 60 acres. She kept a small number of them, and she cooked everything hard. There was no soft-boiled egg in that house, and no raw egg in anything. That last part matters more than anything else, and I'll come back to it. And the risk profile was different in a way nobody likes to say out loud. People got sick. They got sick and it got called a stomach bug and life went on, and some of them didn't recover, and nobody connected it to the crock. The old ways weren't magic. They were what was available. When something better shows up, taking it isn't a betrayal of the people who came before. It's the thing they were trying to get to. Where I differ from a lot of people in this line of work is that I don't think my grandmother did it is a food safety argument. It's a history. Those aren't the same. If you've got a bucket going right now, and I know some of you do because I told you to, hold on. I'll tell you what to do with it in a few minutes. Don't dump it yet. So why is this method everywhere right now? There's no conspiracy, and I won't insult you with one. What's happening is worse than a conspiracy, because it's just incentives running downhill with nobody at the wheel. And I'm implicated in it, so let me lay it out plainly. Water glassing is the perfect video. It's visual. A big glass jar, milky white water, eggs stacked in rows. It photographs beautifully. It's cheap, so the barrier to trying it is nothing. It's old, which in this genre reads as trustworthy on its own. It has the shape of forbidden knowledge, which is the single most reliable structure on this platform. And a 1-pound bag of pickling lime is an affiliate link that pays a few cents every time somebody clicks. But here's the real engine, and it's the ugly one. The failure mode is invisible, and it's delayed. If this method fails you, it fails in month 9, in 1 egg out of 200. And what happens is, somebody gets sick 2 days after breakfast, and never once thinks about the bucket in the basement. There is no feedback loop. The person who got sick doesn't come back and post it in the comments because they don't know. So what you see, month after month, is 1,000 videos of people pulling out a perfectly good-looking egg at month 10 and saying, "See?" And they're not lying. That's really what they got. That's the whole evidence base, and it's built entirely out of the outcome the method can't fail at. Meanwhile, the people who actually study this, Utah State University's Extension Service put out a fact sheet in September of 2023 that says in plain language not to use water glassing for egg storage. Ask Extension, which is the public question service the land-grant universities run, has it on record that the food safety specialists at Washington State and Oregon State advised against recommending it. Penn State's Extension published on home flock egg handling in 2024 and describes it as unreliable and potentially dangerous. Those documents get about 400 views. A water glassing video gets 400,000. That's not suppression, that's a platform. And I fed it last week, and this is me feeding it something else. Here's the first thing that actually works, and it costs you nothing, and it's more traditional than the crock. An unwashed egg, left alone, keeps for weeks at cool room temperature. That's not folklore. That's the entire British and European system. They don't refrigerate eggs in a grocery store in England. The eggs sit on a shelf in the aisle at room temperature and nobody thinks anything of it. Two countries, two completely coherent systems, and the difference is one decision. In the United States, commercial eggs are washed and sanitized before they're sold. That takes the bloom off. Once the bloom is gone, the shell is porous, and the egg has to be refrigerated, by regulation, from the plant to your kitchen. That's why our eggs are in a cold case. Britain went the other direction. They don't wash, so the bloom stays on, and they put enormous effort into vaccinating laying flocks against Salmonella at the source instead. Handle the problem in the hen rather than on the shell. Both work. What doesn't work is picking the half of each system that's convenient, leaving the bloom on because it sounds traditional, while your birds have never seen a vaccine, and you're storing at 60 degrees for 10 months. So here's the honest version of what your unwashed eggs will do. Gathered clean, never washed, kept somewhere genuinely cool, a basement, a north room, that hole in the ground from the first video, a fresh egg holds good quality for 2 to 4 weeks and stays usable somewhat past that. In the refrigerator, unwashed, 3 months is routine. 3 months is most of your gap, and it costs nothing and requires no equipment and no risk. Wash the egg only right before you crack it, not before you store it. That's the whole technique. The second thing takes about 20 minutes and solves the rest of the gap completely. Freeze them. Not in the shell splits. You crack them and freeze the contents, and the National Center for Home Food Preservation at the University of Georgia has had the method published for years. Crack each egg into a small dish first, one at a time, so a bad one can't ruin the batch. Then into a bowl. Beat them just enough to combine the yolk and white. You're not whipping air into them, just breaking them up. Now the one step people skip and then wonder why their frozen eggs came out grainy. Raw yolk gels when it freezes. The proteins bind up and you get a rubbery texture that never comes back. You stop that with either salt or sugar. For eggs you'll use in savory cooking, scrambled, quiche, cornbread, meatloaf, half a teaspoon of salt per cup of beaten egg. A cup is about 5 eggs. For eggs you'll use in baking, cake, cookies, custard, a tablespoon and a half of sugar or corn syrup per cup instead. Label which is which. This is the part you will absolutely get wrong once. And salted eggs in a birthday cake is a thing you only do one time. Pour into an ice cube tray. 3 tablespoons is about 1 whole egg. Freeze solid, pop them out, into a freezer bag, date it, back in the freezer. At 0 degrees they'll hold a year. Thaw in the refrigerator overnight and cook them thoroughly. Freezing does not kill Salmonella, it only stops it. So a frozen egg comes out of the freezer exactly as raw as it went in. The whole setup is an ice cube tray and a box of freezer bags. Call it $7. And notice what you've done. You've moved the problem out of the 60-degree bucket and into the one place in your house that actually stops bacteria instead of politely asking it to wait. Fast, in order. If you have a bucket of limed eggs right now, this is what I'd do, and it's what I did with mine. Don't panic and don't necessarily dump it, but treat every one of those eggs as raw poultry from here on. Rinse the lime off under running water before you crack it. Crack into a separate dish, one at a time, and look and smell. Anything off-colored, cloudy, or sour goes out, and so does anything that came out of a cracked shell. Cook them hard, all the way through, both yolk and white set firm. Nothing soft-boiled, nothing over-easy, nothing raw. No cookie dough, no eggnog, no homemade mayonnaise, no Caesar dressing. And do not serve them to anybody under 5, over 65, pregnant, or on immune-suppressing medication. Those 4 groups are where a Salmonella infection stops being 2 miserable days and becomes a hospital. That's not me covering myself, that's the same list the FDA uses. Beyond that bucket, the ordinary mistakes. Don't wash eggs before storing. You're taking off the only free protection you get. Don't store cracked eggs, not for an hour. Cook them or throw them out. Don't put dirty eggs in with clean ones anywhere, in any method. A little manure on one shell contaminates the container. Don't trust the float test as a safety check. A floating egg has a big air cell, which means it's old. A sinking egg tells you nothing at all about bacteria. And don't take a stranger's word for a food safety practice, including mine. Every claim in this video traces to a university extension service or a federal agency. And I'll put the list in the description so you can go read them yourself, instead of trusting a man on the internet with a good voice. That last one is the one I'd want back from last week. The thing that keeps this working is boring, and it isn't a method at all. It's how you gather. Collect twice a day in warm weather. An egg that sat in a nest box in July for 9 hours has had 9 hours at 100 degrees, and nothing you do afterward undoes that. Keep the nest boxes clean and bedded deep, so the eggs come out clean and you're never tempted to wash one. Cull cracked eggs into a separate bowl at the henhouse door and use them that day. Date every carton and every bag. Pencil on masking tape. You will not remember. And here's the one that nobody talks about, which is that the actual traditional solution to the winter gap wasn't preservation at all. It was the flock. Farmers staggered their birds, brought in new pullets in late summer so they'd come into lay in the fall when the old hens were quitting. 2 age groups, offset. Verna did this, and I don't think she ever thought of it as a technique. You can put up eggs, or you can arrange to have eggs. The second one is less interesting to watch, and it works better. One thing, not 10. This weekend, take 2 dozen eggs out of the surplus and freeze them properly. Ice cube tray, $3 if you don't own one. Box of freezer bags, $4. Crack them one at a time into a saucer, into a bowl. Beat just until combined. Half a teaspoon of salt per 5 eggs if they're for cooking. Tablespoon and a half of sugar per 5 if they're for baking. Pick one and do one batch. Don't try to do both your first time. 3 tablespoons per compartment. Freeze overnight, pop them out into a bag, write the date and write salt or sugar on the bag in marker. 20 minutes of work, $7 of equipment, 2 dozen eggs that will be there in January, and that will not be a coin flip. Then, if you've got a lime bucket in the basement, go put a piece of tape on the lid that says cook hard, so that whoever opens it in November knows what they're holding. That's the whole thing. Next week I'll show you the soap, rendering fat, leaching lye out of hardwood ash in a barrel with a hole in the bottom, and boiling it down to a bar in the yard. I'll tell you up front that the wood ash version has a problem I'm going to have to be honest about too, and we'll deal with it when we get there. Freeze the eggs first. Verna used to say, a thing is only worth knowing if it's still true when you check it. I told you something last week that wasn't. Go check the next one I tell you.